Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program. I am going to skip the preliminaries. You'll get all of the good stuff about the program and all of the outlets where you can listen to and watch, and the book that's now available and support and all that good stuff. We're going to get into that a little later because we have a returning guest of all things. This particular week that we're putting these programs on the radio, the broadcast version, is a series of returning guests, and I'm very excited about that. And Cortney McDermott is my guest, and she's got a book that is entitled, it's a book, it's a conversation, Give Yourself Permission. Mm-hmm. Now, Cortney, first of all, thank you so much for joining us again. I'm really looking forward to this because I know that we, as a species, as individuals, we have a real hard time giving ourselves permission to do much of anything, especially when it comes to taking care of self. We're going to help others. We're going to do other things. I got to go to work and I got to do this for the employer, and on and on and on. And we never stop to say, wait a minute, what about me? And that's not being selfish, is it?
No, it's not being selfish at all. And thank you for having me, Richard. I'm excited for us to dig into this whole rabbit hole together, this beautiful rabbit hole.
You think we'll run into Alice and the rabbit?
I certainly hope so at some point.
Looking forward to it. So you're a luminary in the realms of personal development and business strategies. And this is one of the things that I want to do. Now that my book is out, I want to do a TED Talk. I got to figure out how to make that happen. And I will. Universe, putting it out there.
Yeah.
And a best-selling author as well with this particular book, Give Yourself Permission. And I like the way this is phrased, a tome that transcends conventional self-help literature. If I may share with you, George Carlin made an interesting comment in one of his shticks about self-help, in the bookstores, the self-help section. It says, self-help? Well, wait a minute. What do you need? If it's self-help, what do you need somebody else's help for if it's self-help? And in a manner of speaking, your book helps us to help self.
Well, my book has been self-help. I know someone once said it was self-help without being preachy or something like that, but I definitely don't. I guess I consider all of it something you're doing within and for you, right? But at the same time, it's also changing everything around you. And so I think when anyone out there is professing to have your answers or to say, I know how to maybe fix you or something like that, that for me is a real red alert. I don't have anyone's answers. It's one of the things I say all the time, whether it's a Fortune 500 executive coming and asking something, or anyone really, as I say, one of the first things I say is, I don't have your answers, but you do. And I think any guide that is directing your way back to those ruby slippers is your answer. But it's, again, a reminder rather than a prescriptive how-to.
I don't know about you. I have gone to a few mediums in my day and asked questions. But I always had that perspective you talk about. It's like, I know this, okay? I already know this, but I could sure use a little confirmation. It would kind of brighten my day if I could just get a little support. And of course, I also recognize too, because everything's in flux, that what they're telling me at this particular moment might be true, shall we say. But in the next moment, it could change because everything is in motion.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about this aspect of, I guess the best way to put it in that respect is that, constant is the change in the universe, is the only thing that's, change is the only thing you can count on.
Yeah. Change is the only constant. Yeah. I love that. And I love the fact that you're bringing up mediums, or what we might call psychics, because a good medium was really someone who's deeply listening, and that happens on many levels. And what they're picking up on when they're really connected to those intuitive powers, or again, we don't have as much explanation for this scientifically as I wish we did. But what I believe they're picking up on is the dominant thought patterns, emotional patterns, habitual behavioral patterns occurring within your being in any given moment. And those all can change. And that is really the subject of both of my books, really, is how we start changing that from within so we can start to affect a different material outcome in our life.
And that's the interesting dynamic that a lot of folks, they don't honestly believe they can do that. That's
Mm-hmm.
not part of their makeup. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That, I'm on the wheel and this is my life on the wheel. And eventually I'll fall off the wheel, i.e., die, and so forth. And yet it's like, well, it's kind of like my book choices. The first thing you have to do is make a choice. And what you're talking about is the same thing. You've got to start somewhere. And if you don't like where you are because of all of the choices you've made up to this point, then choose something else.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people, they don't know what is available to them, do they?
Well, choice is such a fascinating phenomenon, right? Because, well, the first thing that hit me when you started talking about choice is I was reminded of there's a saying in Italian, they say l'imbarazzo della scelta, and that means the embarrassment of choice.
Hmm.
And everywhere we're looking is this embarrassment of choice. There's so many things you could choose from. Not to mention the fact that most people are feeling this way because the vast majority of humans are going around with somewhere between 50 to 70,000 thoughts a day, which I'm sure you know and are aware of. And the thing that is happening with, again, most humans is that those 50 to 70,000 thought impulses are the same or virtually the same every day.
Mm-hmm.
It would almost be like if you put, and this, they've done actually some studies on this that are pretty fascinating. If you kind of superimposed cameras on someone's day to day, the activities that you would see for most people would be the same day in and day out. These are habitual thought and behavioral patterns that are literally shaping physical matter. And what we know from also neuroscience, I mean, every field really that's in looking at human potential, whether that's neuroscience or epigenetics or quantum physics, we know that the particle is a wave at the same time, right? We know that up until the point of observation, i.e., attention, in other words, when we really start to focus in on something, the wave pattern translates into particle. In other words, the non-physical moves into physical. And so, what's really critical, I think, for people to start to understand is this is happening anyway. Either you're conscious of it or you're unconscious of it, but it's happening. And so, one of the biggest things coming back to choice in the beginning of this response was there's so much embarrassment of it. And if you can't sort of filter through and really hone in on what would those healthy choices look like, and then start to redirect and refocus and just constantly learning how to use your mind, how to use your imagination, and how to use your behavioral patterns as a consequence in a way that supports who you're becoming rather than hinders it. Right. So, yeah, a lot of people won't feel like that they have that choice until they start redirecting. And that does take some work at the beginning. I cover this a lot in my second book to how I went about it, but it is the most worthwhile work that you can do.
Mm. Well, how did you get started doing this work? I've often joked with some of my guests about how, okay, so you've written these two books, so you must have this down pat, and you're working this, and it's doing great for you. And most of them say, I'm still working it too. And I say the same thing. I don't have all the answers. God forbid, don't follow me.
Yeah. Oh, well, so for me, it's, there's so many, as the song goes, there's so many cold and lonely hallelujah moments of breaking through those patterns. And those patterns are still there. They're still in the psyche. They're in the individual and the collective psyche. So the question becomes, I think, how bad do you want it?
Mm,
And are you willing to put in the effort that leads to the miracle of compound interest? Einstein talked about compound interest as the eighth wonder of the universe. And most people really miss this point. And also, in this unconscious state, we don't realize the compound interest of all of the thought investments, emotional investments, and physical investments we've been making up into this point. So if we're totally unaware of that, that's okay, because all you have to do is look at the different results in your life to see what the cumulative effect of those decisions or choices as you've put them have been. But again, those might have been a little unconscious. For me, for a really long time in my life, and I can still go unconscious, absolutely. But for me, for a really long time, it was all unconscious. And there were some really pretty detrimental thought patterns and psychic patterns in my field, and also as a consequence, obviously, then behavioral patterns and all of that. So it does take some reworking. But to come back to this compound interest thing, which we may or may not have discussed in the first discussion we had, but it is a really phenomenal thing when you start to add up those tiny practices or those tiny redirects that we're talking about. It's like a plane that is course correcting virtually the entire time it's on its flight path. If it doesn't do that, it'll end up in a dramatically different place than the destination it's supposed to take you to. Okay. And it's those tiny course corrections, those tiny, like, wait, let me readjust. Let me readjust. This is back to target. This is going back here. And again, it does take some work at the beginning, but a lot of work went into the formation that has created who you are right now. And what I will say, though, further to that is a lot less work goes into when you're consciously directing, because the unconscious one happened through all sorts of ways: societal norms, dictums from parents, from loved ones, from friends. There's all sorts of things that go into having created who you are right now. And that's all okay. And it's all okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing to fix. There's just something to redirect if you're feeling the call to do so.
Mm. Now that's an interesting point to bring up too. You use the term "if you're called to do so."
Mm.
All right, who's calling?
Mm. For me, it's that intelligence. It's the same intelligence that is conducting the trillions of biochemical reactions occurring in your body every second. It's the same intelligence that's sending electrical impulses from your brain down into the different parts of your body, saying, let's move. The one that you don't actually have to think about, that's sort of directing the whole show. And
Hmm.
when you tune into that intelligence, call it what you may, it doesn't matter what you call it, right? It's not the name of the thing, as Shakespeare said, that defines the thing or that determines the nature of the thing. A rose is still a rose, right? But it's really about tuning in. And this is the hardest thing to do because we don't want to, and we're hyper distracted. So when we talked about the embarrassment of choice, it's so much easier and more exciting for the brain to wake up and go straight to those pings and those messages and all the places where people might need us, like you were, alluding to at the beginning, or where we feel needed and important. But it's really about starting to understand, is that my agenda? And the more you tune into this intelligence, it has an agenda for you. It has a very specific, beautiful agenda for you. And railing against it is usually a recipe for burnout and frustration and all the things that it feels like when you're not listening. And listening to it is this really groovy sort of dance that you get to do with life.
I find it interesting that that one element, change, we struggle with a lot. And I've been saying this. I kind of say this out loud to myself, though I feel that I'm not going to say 100%, but maybe I give myself 90% good with change.
Hmm.
Um, that I remember the book "Who Moved the Cheese." I think I shared this the last time we were on the program, and it's like, go ahead, do it. Just tell me where. Okay. And of course that was not actually part of the context of that particular book, that, no, it's gonna, the cheese is gonna get moved and they're not gonna tell you. They didn't, that wasn't part of it. It was, but that was always my perspective. It's like, I don't care if you move it to the moon, just tell me that's where it is so that I can stop looking for it. I
Hmm.
even joke about how, you say, well, it was in the last place I looked when
Hmm.
when you find it. It's like, well, of course it was in the last place. Although I love one comedian says, I found something and I didn't want to have to say it was in the last place I looked. So I kept looking. I found it, but I kept looking. And in a manner of speaking, change is kind of that way too. That there's, I think we know instinctively that nothing lasts forever. And I keep telling people whether, as of our conversation on this program right now, we have a little bit of a short-term heat wave coming. Short term, it's temporary. It's going to change. It's going to cool down, but we still have to go through it. All right. And it may not be as bad as they've been making it. And they always seem to make it worse than it's going to be, so that when we do go through it, that wasn't too bad. Yeah, I didn't care much for the 80 degrees or the 85, but at least it wasn't 105, like in Phoenix, where I was born and raised. Um, your other book, of course, Change Starts With You. I mean, and that's really, it's almost, it's almost along the lines, if I may borrow a phrase from Gandhi, be the change you want to see in the world. Well, and that's just it. For us to change the world, we have to change ourselves, right? Is there a,
Yeah.
and I hate to codify it down into something simple, because I suppose in one sense it really is kind of simple, but are there any particular steps you've come up with in this context of this particular book, A Change Starts With You, that we can start working on? And maybe it's not accepting that everything is temporary and everything is changing because everything's in motion. That might be a little bit more than some people are ready to comprehend. Anything in particular?
Yeah, well, there's a lot packed in there. Change Starts Within You, which was the first book. It's funny that you bring that up because I quoted Tolstoy in that book saying, everyone thinks of the changing the world. No one thinks of changing himself.
Mm,
And therein lies the crux. Again, Shakespeare's coming up today. I don't know why. Therein lies the crux. It's also reminding me of that story. You may have heard this. I love this story of God talking to his angels, and he's saying, where should I hide so people can't find me? And one of the angels says, hide in the deepest depths of the ocean. No one will ever come looking for you there. And another angel says, go up into the highest mountains. There's no way they'll find you. And God goes and turns and looks to his favorite or his preferred angel. We like to think God doesn't have a preferred angel, but he turns to his preferred angel and he says, where do you think I should hide? And the preferred angel says, hide where they'll never look for you. Hide in the human heart.
mhm.
And
Sebastian
yeah.
Talbot wrote the song to that, which
Mm,
we play at the end of these programs on occasion. Very
mhm.
familiar with it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful story. And obviously, that's a little bit my own adaptation of it. But what I love about it is that's the key that we all have, and that can be very frightening because when you start to unlock the gates of that, you really start to open up to new potentials. You start to have to die to the self, as is referred to in almost every spiritual text in one form or another. And it's an awakening to potentials that are so beyond, I think, what we're capable of understanding consciously. And this is one of the reasons in my work I love to study epigenetics and neuroscience, and really kind of get as best a hang I can on how the formless is shaping the form. But to go back, again, as I said, a lot's packed into that question, but it's so simple at the end of the day. And I think that's what makes it so elusive, because we go back for a couple seconds inward, right? We drop in, and then it's so like stormy sometimes, right? And so it's like, wait, just get me back out there where that distraction hit is available. And if you can stay in the white fire of really getting with this intelligence that I'm talking about, that change that starts within you, as I was alluding to in the first book,
Hmm.
really starts to emerge and shape the form, shape the material in ways that are unfathomable.
I think that's also pretty, it can be very exciting when you say that are unfathomable, that we've never thought of before.
Mm,
And I think that that's one of the aspects of all of this that should be exciting, but because we have sort of been trained, I'm going to stick with that word. I've got some others that I could use, but we've been trained
mhm,
to look for permanence. I've talked about economists, and I listen to the economic news when it comes out, and the economists, they will report whatever the data is, the statistics, the
mhm,
facts, okay, the
mhm,
numbers. And then they will start to pontificate on how those numbers are not necessarily that great, in
mhm,
spite of how great they might be.
mhm,
I mean, would you really want? Because I don't know because I'm not an economist. Would you really want unemployment at zero? Everybody's working. Isn't that great?
mhm.
Inflation is zero. You know, and so on and so on and so on. And yet, the economists will find some way to look at it and say, no, it's not. It's not that. It's not as good as you think it is. So,
Mhm.
my question to all of the economists, who Will Rogers once said could be laid end to end and will still all point in different directions. And the question is, so what numbers would make you happy? We want you happy. That's what we're all about, is being happy. So, what would make you happy? What numbers?
Mm,
And actually, no numbers would ever make an economist happy because it's never good enough. Now, I'm
mm,
all for there's room for improvement, but it's like, can we not take the win? I got off a soda, for example, in 2020, July, when I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Now,
mm,
it's 2024. Yes, I have had a few over the course of the last 4 years, but I didn't fall off the wagon to the extent that that's all I drink. Okay.
mm,
It's an occasional thing, and my blood sugar's fine. I check it. And someone said, well, yeah, but what you're drinking that, and it's sparkling ice drinks, that have no sugar. Uh, they're in plastic bottles. And you know how bad plastic is for you? Say, hey, stop. Give me and let me enjoy the victory of not being, shall we say, controlled by the soft drinks. Okay. One
mm,
step at a time.
yeah.
So if we
Yeah.
could just take those victories, what about that perspective in terms of going through the process of giving oneself permission as well? And I'm kind of incorporating both books titles and all this kind of stuff, in
Right.
terms of giving yourself permission to elicit change in your life and within yourself and so forth.
Yeah. There's two things I feel really hyper called to address in
Mhm.
all of that. The first is confirmation bias. So I'll come back to that in a second. And the second is the five steps, like the illusion of just do these things, because that was also from the earlier question. And I want to make sure it does get addressed because it's so important. What do you do? How do you start coming out of this? Because this is the thing, right? We want to know what we do. So let me first, again, go back to the confirmation bias. So confirmation bias is fascinating to me. And I talk a little bit about it, although I don't use those terms for it in this second book, because the point is we find what we're looking for every time, every single time. And there is actually a part of our brain called the reticular activating system, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And that part of our brain, its sole function is to filter through the gargantuan amount of information that we are exposed to daily and to decide what's important to Richard. Let me bring that to his conscious awareness. That's what your brain is tasked with doing every day if your brain is functioning normally,
Mhm.
every second of every day. So we've all seen this. Like, for example, you get a new car and suddenly everyone's got that car, right? You never saw it before. Like
Mhm.
I got a Bronco when I moved here to the States a couple months ago, and I love it. And which I found out was actually the first outdoor, what's it called? The that kind of car. It was the first sports utility
Sport
vehicle, I
utility.
guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so anyway, I got this Bronco. And I swear I see Broncos everywhere and I don't notice cars. So now it's like the Broncos everywhere, right? And we've all had something like that happen to us, right? And that's this reticular activating system. The other thing it does is it drops things in and you just say, "Oh gosh, I can't even how did that even happen?" This also goes to quantum entanglement and all sorts of other phenomena. You can study the crossover of all of these, and it's fascinating. But again, you find what you're looking for. So if the economist is looking for a specific forecast, or you're looking for a specific forecast in your life, you are going to find it.
Mm-hmm.
If the questions that you're proposing are, how come I can't shed those 5 pounds? I do everything. Why can't I? Your brain's job is to actually answer that question for you consistently. So this is why we often get told better questions, better answers, right? Because our brain is answering. It's the greatest search engine ever created, and it's right over your shoulders. And it's looking for what you want to find. So that's the first thing that I want to touch on. The second thing is these 5 things, or, what do you do, or where do you start? And I believe that in a lot of ways, we've been a little duped in this sense, because most of the time, again, we get these prescriptive remedies to sort of address something, fix something, make something, whatever. And it's much simpler, because what we're really talking about is a shift in consciousness. It's simple. Again, that does not mean it's easy.
Mm.
And as Da Vinci said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So it really comes to this place of like, whoa, you're like, it's juicy. It feels really good, because it's your shift in consciousness that is actually going to start making you aware of different things. And the doing part, I guess, is less than a doing so much as a feeling into it. I'll give you an example that I love, because again, there's a slight crossover, but it's really beautiful to see the ways that this can be applied. So Jim Carrey, I love that guy.
Oh, yeah.
He is such an eclectic creator. He's a phenomenal thinker. I just love him. And I remember watching a bit from Oprah with him. I don't know how many years ago this was, but it was quite a few years ago. And he was talking about how he wrote himself this check for Dumb and Dumber. I think it was for $10 million for acting services rendered. And he would go up into the hills of Hollywood. And I hope I'm getting this mostly right, but he'd go up there and he would stay up there at night until he felt the implications of becoming an actor in that strong of demand. And he actually, on the check, he had put, I think it was something around Thanksgiving or some date like that. And I believe that the check for Dumb and Dumber for $10 million came in shortly before his expiration date on that check, if I'm right. But it's something along those lines, and it's relatively accurate. And but the piece that gets forgotten is you're not willing it to happen. You're not saying, I'm going to change all the 70,000 thoughts going on in my head so that this thing happens. You're really just directing your focus to something really simple that is craving, I would say it is an evolutionary impulse within you. And this is also an extremely important distinction. There's a big distinction between an evolutionary impulse coursing through you and a sort of, I want to be like someone else. I want to do this thing over here because it looks fancy and it looks exciting. And I want to kind of tap into that. There's a very, very different energy. An evolutionary impulse is something that your being is uniquely here to do. And you will, again, convening with that intelligence, you will know you will discover more and more what that is. And that tapping into that, feeling it, is actually where it's all at. And there are so many ways to do it. So we can get into those if you'd like.
I would love to, because I am in a situation. Matter of fact, it was shortly after we moved here. I printed, and it was a very small check that I printed. I created it in Photoshop, I think, for $5 million. And I had that in my wallet for the longest time. I probably still have it, but I've switched over into a different kind of wallet that works much better than the leather thing in the back pocket. God forbid I should ever have the wallet like George Costanza had, where he leaned to one side because his wallet was so full. But anyway, I carried that around with me for the longest time. And unfortunately, let me rephrase that. And it hasn't manifested yet. But
yeah.
I went through a process, and I want to get into those 5 steps, because I went through a process where there was this beautiful story about these 2 guys that went to breakfast, lunch, and dinner. One guy would pay, the other guy, was very appreciative and wanted to know why. The guy told a story of how he found this lamp that was dusty. He was dusting it off. Genie pops out. One wish, buddy. Okay, I want to have exactly what I need when I need it. And that's how he was able to pay for the breakfasts and lunches and all these kinds of things that they would go out and do, and that he'd have exactly the right amount. And I thought, well, okay, well, I like that. And then one of my guests told me, they said, well, yeah, but see, you're blocking, blah, 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 blah. So I thought, okay, I'm content with where I'm at, and I want more. All right, well, that's not real specific, but I want more. And then it was not long ago, literally a week or two since, as of this conversation, I said, okay, then let's lay it out on the line. Let's make it specific. I'm not a greedy person. I don't want millions. Not right now, anyway. Maybe later to really do stuff. Right now, and I will start with, I'm telling this to the universe, and universe, I want to start with $100,000. Pays off everything we owe, allows us to take a 2-week trip to Ireland. Who knows? Maybe there's a down payment there for a house in Ireland where we can move to, which is what we want to do. Helping other people. There are organizations. The very first radio station I worked for, I want to give them $5,000 to support the work that they do for the visually impaired and the blind, and so on. And so, and it was funny because I have this black book that I carry with me that I write down stuff in, and I made that list, but it was initially to pay everything off. I'm thinking, no, you got to be specific. So I started pay off the credit cards, pay off the personal loans, pay off the trailer, pay off the car, pay off the this, pay off the that. Send money, X number of dollars to Sun Sound, send X number of dollars to, and pay off the personal loans that helped us get through a rough spot and on. So I'm trying to be specific in these kinds of things. So now I've done all of this. I continue to, and I know I don't have to look up and say, okay, universe, because the universe is everywhere. It's like when I talk with my friend Dr. Sky about astronomy, space, aviation, and weather on another program. Folks, we're not going to have you look up. We're going to have you look out there. Okay. But in terms of the universe it's here too. So I'm curious. Where do I need to adjust what I have done thus far to get the universe to bring about that abundance, that most importantly, and I recognize this, I can't take it with me. In spite of Steve Martin, who said in the 70s on one of his record albums that he's going to take it with him. In other words, I understand the temporal aspects, but I also understand how much good can be done with it all. So am I on track? Am I even close, or do I need to burn that little the straw hut down and start over?
So there's so many insights flooding through for you right now that I'm almost like, wait, hold on. There's so much coming through. But before I share any of those with you, I'm reminded of that story of this very wealthy man who has these gold bricks under his bed, and he's about to die, and he knows he's going to die. And he prays to God. He says, let me keep my gold. Let me keep my gold. And God says, sure. Okay, fine. You can keep your gold when you die. And so he, bundles up all his gold, and he's ready to go. And he appears before the gates of, what are they called?
Pearly gates, the pearly gates.
He appears before the heaven's gates, and he is in front of the archangels, and he said, and they say, "Oh, you coming? Well, you can't bring that in here." He says, "No, God said I could bring it in here." And anyway, they have a little debate about it, and then all of a sudden, it's Archangel, I think, was it Peter? But anyway, he says, "Okay, fine, but why do you want to bring pavement into heaven?"
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah.
So that story was coming through. So many insights here, Richard, for you. So let me see which one comes through really first, straight off the bat. There's a lot of seesawing in it feels in your psyche. So it's, well, I don't want that much. I'm not greedy. I don't want millions, but hey, maybe I would like that 5 million, and I wrote this check, and do I want this, or do I, what do I really want? And this honing in on it like you have is a great place to start, of saying, I'm ready for this. And a wanting energy, by the way, is a very different frequency than a having energy. When you know you have all the abundance, your frequency is completely different. I liken it sometimes to, say, for instance, someone is courting you, right? And they have a really needy energy, like, oh, I need to be around you and I just need you and I want to be only with you and I, need this thing. We're sort of really, most of us really turned off by that kind of energy. So it's not coming from a neediness, it's coming from a knowingness that that abundance is available to you and is within you and all around you. And truly, when you were talking about looking up or looking out, when you go into nature, you can see this so readily. We are surrounded by this magnificent display of abundance in everything. And so it's just such a fantastic reminder for us to go out, look up at the stars, realize how tiny you are, that you're spinning around on this ball of dirt, and just tap into and tune into those evolutionary impulses. Now, money itself is not the evolutionary impulse. 5 million is not the evolutionary impulse. What is underneath that, and again, these are behind, underneath, they're all metaphors. But what is driving that? What is the evolutionary force that's driving that? In your case, it's really beautiful. I want to feel free. I want to feel debt free. I am excited to be able to give to causes and things that have helped advance me in my life. Tapping into that, again, very, very different frequency. Everything, Tesla talked about it as everything. If you want to understand the nature of reality, understand frequencies and vibrations, because that's all we are. And again, paraphrasing, that's not his exact words, but frequencies and vibrations is what we're paying attention to here. So the frequency of this is very different than the frequency of lack. It's just a very different frequency. So when you tap into the already havingness, and you do that more than you do this other thing of not havingness. And let me explain this even more simply. When you are more attuned to the non-physical than you are to the physical will start to change and take shape based on the non-physical information that you are providing. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense.
Okay, there's a lot more there, but I'm wondering if you have any questions about it, because so many intuitive insights came through while you were saying that. And sorry, my phone's off. My daughter left her phone down here and I'm realizing it's pinging. So we're also getting some yummy, yummy ping energy for us too.
Absolutely.
There you go.
And here's the beautiful thing is a lot of people think that a lot of the sounds that are going on in their realm are being heard and we're not hearing them. So
Oh,
that's
great. So
fine.
my
Yeah.
sound equipment works great.
Yes, it works
Fantastic.
beautifully, beautifully.
Great.
But in terms of focusing on the visible, I mean, focusing on the invisible that then transforms the visible, the non-material versus material. It's along the lines of in the beginning was the Word and the Word was God and then so forth, that it was the thought first before the universe ever began.
Yeah.
And I have heard that over not even do that since I was 17 starting my search. I've heard that over and over and over again, that's where you have to start. You have to start with the thought. And if I'm correct, please correct me if I am not, I have to start thinking or imagining, if you will, that I have it now. Not that I'm going to start going out and buying all kinds of stuff. That isn't the goal. I often go ahead, please.
Yeah, I would say, and I did use havingness, but havingness, as I mentioned, is about the beingness. So one of the most beautiful questions, I love questions because the mind responds way better to a question than an affirmation. So this is why lots of times positive affirmations do not work for people, because your unconscious or your subconscious is in direct opposition to that. So imagine it's like the tiny tip of the iceberg trying to say, no, we're only this little tip, but really there's this whole mass that has formed under that. And so we have to move in a way that is gentle and that is almost tricking the mass that has been formed, so that can start to change. And so the invitation is to feel into the beingness. So when I talked about questions, there's one question that I really, really, really love. And you can change this in for your gender, but I say, who is she? Who is the she that you're stepping into now? The potential that you're stepping into now. How does she move? How does she walk? How does she come into a room? How does she breathe? What kind of experiences does she get to invite? And these questions are such a gentle reinvention mechanism for all of us. And so when you imagine the havingness, again, it's about tuning into the beingness, a man who gives to causes that are really important, a man who has total economic freedom. What does he, how does he move? How does he talk? How does he express? How does he come into a room? How does he feel? And you will start to feel this. But this is the thing. This is a very strong activation energy. But if your focus is on this activation energy for 30 seconds a day, and the rest of the day is like humdrum, let me go here and there and all over the place, the process is going to take quite a bit longer to answer your previous question. The amount of time, and again, we can discuss time. That's such a there's I mean, let's put it in the simplest way. All probability outcomes exist simultaneously in the same time that we are always in. That's the simplest way I can put that. So every probability outcome that is possible, which is potentially, as far as we know, infinite, all of those are available. The question is, which one are you tuning into? So it's like a radio station. I don't know how many years ago I read this in a book, a Kundalini book, actually, was, which station are you attuned to? If you're trying to get to FM, but you're an AM, you're just not gonna hear FM because you're an AM. So you've got to shift the frequency, and the frequency happens through questions like this, and literally just stopping. And before you go into a room, before you start a podcast, not saying, oh, I, just got to this and I'm going to this other thing. And, let me just, because that's what most of us get tied up in. And I often urge people to remember the power of that simplicity of my focus is relatively singular, and everything arises from that beautiful singularity. And really, really tuning into whatever that looks like for you, because that means the healthy cell starts to come alive. We have a body, we are a body, the same body, we're a collection of cells. And if enough of those cells are in a state of wellness and thriving, juicy excitement about the intelligence that's directing them, we do have a chance to sort of heal this collective. And so that's the invitation, is really, how do I bring that to myself? And consistently going back until your mind has been retrained, because your mind's been trained anyway. So this has already happened. It's just, again, happened unconsciously. So bringing it into conscious awareness, saying, you know what, it's more important to me to focus the vast majority of my days on what it is, the frequency that I want, that I am feeling, that is calling to be embodied through me, than it is to be chasing all around and trying to get all sorts of things to happen, to make it happen, as we say, and as we doctrinate a lot of people. It's like, no, that is exhausting. And Lao Tzu put it so beautiful: in the non-doing, it is done. In the non-doing, it is done.
It's almost like the Buddha searching for enlightenment, searching, looking, doing. Finally, plops down under the Bodhi trees. I give up. Boom.
Exactly.
It happened.
Yeah. That's exactly what I talk about in the second book. I've had experiences like that, some of which have lasted 2 days, of a complete transcendence of all that we perceive as real in this world, gone. And this was this was through all the things I talk about, how I did this in this book.
Mm-hmm.
Give yourself permission, because it was the exact same thing. And I specifically dedicate a chapter to precisely what you just talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is in our world, this world, that is one of the hardest things to do because we're always told if you work hard, you know, matter of fact, another one, especially within the metaphysical community, is if you do, again, there's the do, if you just do what you love, the money will come. And some people go through their entire lives doing what they say they love doing. And they made it to, let's just say they made it to old age, but it didn't come. You know, the big bucks didn't come. I'll go back to the statement. You can't take it with you unless, of course, you want to use it as pavement.
Yeah, I heard a great reminder of this, that, and I don't know where I heard this, but it was, you can't, you never see a U-Haul behind a hearse.
No, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. I have never heard that before, but I like it.
Although the
Um,
Egyptians did think they were taking it with them, and they devised some pretty radically intricate ways to supposedly do that. But aside from that,
yeah.
I do want to highlight that, because two of the chapters in my book are in this second book are about doing what you love and making permission to do what you love and permission to make a lot of money doing what you love.
Yeah.
And that fifth chapter, it was the fourth chapter, I think, yes, on money. The fifth chapter is on play, and that's where I go into what we were talking about a moment ago. But the money component, if you don't understand some key principles, which are some of which we've been covering here on this episode, it will not come, to your point.
Yeah.
It's tapping into a different consciousness, a different vibration, a different frequency. And
Mm.
once you understand that, everything changes.
I'll throw another element in here for you to allude to expound upon. We talk regularly. Every program I bring this up. We ask people to take time and go within into that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still small voice, which actually has been voices have been added because you have your ancestors, you have the angels, you have all of those realms that are out there that people talk about that are there to help you.
Mm.
And when you were talking about this, the thought came to me, okay, so next question is, okay, so what should the steps be? And immediately what came right after that was, she doesn't have to give you any steps.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to go inside and
You got it.
listen.
You got it. Yeah.
Talk to
The
us about the importance of the
Mhm.
intuition.
The most important thing you can do, and it's the hardest, as you mentioned, is to relax. There's no higher technique.
Mm.
It's just relax. And oftentimes that's so hard. And people say, well, because I'll often suggest, I won't suggest any fancy meditations. I say, go lay down for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, set a timer on your phone, just go lay down.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times people say, well, I can't go just lay down. And I often will quote the Dalai Lama saying, if you don't think you have, or at least I think it was the Dalai Lama recently, I heard someone else say it and they quoted, they reference someone else, but if you don't have 5 minutes to meditate, meditate for an hour. If you think you don't have 5 minutes to meditate, meditate for an hour. And so I'll often, take from that and say, if you think you don't have 5 minutes to lay down, go lay down for an hour. Because what's happening when you're laying down, when you're relaxing, is you are almost instantaneously starting to shift your brainwave frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
And so you will move into more of a conversation with this intelligence. And you do have to be very deliberate about it, because we are in a hyperactive, directionless moment. And you can feel the strain. You can see it. You can feel it. I can actually sometimes just see the imprint of this tension and anxiety on people. I can
Mm.
literally feel it, perceive it, see it. And the invitation is, once you let up on that, what happens is your field, your electromagnetic field, which is an actual measurable field around your physical body, will expand, will start to send out different signals that are inviting back like signals.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's so important. Like the one thing I would say to do is to not do. Go lay down. Another suggestion I often make is yawning, which is considered the best kept secret of neuroscience. Set a timer on your phone and yawn for 30 seconds. Same thing. You're going to be triggering that relaxation and response in your body, but you're also going to be triggering an energizing response in your body. It releases a whole host of beautiful neurochemicals into your bloodstream. It also bonds you with people. It releases a lot of oxytocin, serotonin, all sorts of beautiful things. But it also sends a message to your vagus nerve that you're safe. And
Mm.
this is one of the biggest invitations I'll also extend here in this moment is when you relax, you're sending the message, I'm safe. And the only place to really tune into those frequencies we were talking about is from safety, is from a felt sense of safety in your body.
Mm.
And so just really relaxing and commanding that safety, even if you're not feeling it. And I get it. There's times in my life, oh, good Lord, when I had to lay down and be like, you're safe, you're safe, you're safe. And I had to let through all of that tension that was still corrupting my field. I had to really say, I had to really get with it so that it could move. It could move. Like you were talking about at the very beginning, everything's moving.
Mm-hmm.
But if you try to keep it stuck and you say like this is the way and I'm frustrated it's this way and all of that again, it's exhausting and it's actually just not the best use of any of your faculties. So
Cortney McDermott's our guest. Give yourself permission is the title of one of her books, and then of course there's Changes Start With You is her other one, a first one, and it's fascinating this conversation we're having here. I have to say, when you use the word move, my mind went to 7 years old in church in mass, St. Agnes Catholic Church in Phoenix, interestingly enough, and I'm sitting there and I'm trying to blink twice. I'm going to do two identical blinks, and I am just about to drive myself insane.
mm.
And suddenly the insight hit me. It's impossible. There are a lot of things that are possible, but to do two identical blinks, no matter how fast you are, is universally impossible. It's a violation, if you will, of the laws of physics. And here's the reason why. One word: moving.
Mm.
Everything is moving. And it doesn't matter how fast you blink. And so I let it go. I let it go. But there was another element that popped into my mind I want to ask you about in regards to all of this that we've already shared, and we've shared a lot. Same general time period, 7 years old, 8 years old. And I had a day where every time I turned around, I said, I've been here before, but I've never been here before. Deja vu.
Mm.
What do you make of that in relation to all of this? I'll give you my understanding of it later, but
Yeah.
what role can or does deja vu play if we're aware, if we're consciously aware that, oh, okay, this is familiar.
Oh, familiar. What a great word. Déjà vu in French means already seen. Already seen. So beautiful that you looked around and you said, I've seen this. I've been here. I've been here before.
Mm-hmm.
My best explanation, as far as I can understand that phenomenon, because I think it's probably happened to everyone who's listening, is the one I gave earlier about multiple or potentially infinite probability outcomes existing at the same time. You're in
Mm.
all of them. You're even in the probability outcome of the 7-year-old self, as hard as that is to understand. You're in the cognitively understand or wrap our heads around. You're
Mm-hmm.
in the probability. The minute your consciousness flashes to it, you're in that probability outcome. You are temporarily experiencing that potential probability outcome, and they all do coexist. And so you have been here before and you are always here. And the question is, where do you direct the consciousness then?
Mm.
And which version, which probability outcome do you want to experience now? I once told my daughter this story. I made up this story while she was going to bed one night, and it was like imagining a little girl in a field full of flowers, and every flower she picked was a specific experience, and she knew that the flowers, which experiences the flowers represented, and she would choose based on which experience she wanted to have. And then one day she falls asleep in the field, and upon awakening, she doesn't remember that every flower has a different experience and wait for her. And so she starts picking flowers, and some of them are frightening. And she's like, what is this? And some of them are beautiful, but they were all there. And now she's just gone unconscious. She's fallen asleep, literally. She's forgotten that they're all coexisting, that they're all potentials for her. And I think that's a beautiful way of recognizing, like, yes, they're all there. And it also takes us out of the fear of when something's happening, you're not that thing that's happening. You are observing and you are experiencing the thing that's happening. To the extent to which you are entwining yourself to it is the extent to which you are either going unconscious or staying really conscious.
Mm. I would take it that certain dreams, if not all dreams, might apply under that same explanation, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Because the line from one of John Denver's songs, I dreamed I was a mountain and da 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 da, and then I dreamed there was a flower in the meadow. Then I awoke and I found the flower in my hand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So the dreams fall under that same category and that same explanation. And I have to say that one of my favorites that I share regularly is the one where I am driving on a pristine white concrete highway. Forest is off on my right, and it's this sweeping curve. And I decide I'm going to pull off. And I pull off. I go through the forest and I hit this giant green meadow. And I pull up to this house, this stone house with these arched windows.
Mm-hmm.
And I go inside, and there's my grandmother on my mother's side. There's my grandmother. Uh, I think it was Consuelo was her name, but she was referred to as Chona. Anyway, not a word was spoken. And we hugged. And I got the impression it's okay. Everything's okay. I wish I could remember at what age I had that dream. She passed away in our home the day after Thanksgiving after watching her favorite movie that she took us to the drive-in movie theater in Florence, Arizona when we were kids to see Sound of Music.
Yeah.
And I have to say it was a wonderful experience. And also my parents, they did a great job in reference to my grandmother lying there lifeless in our home. It was my mother's mother. I can only imagine what my mother must have been going through, but at the same time, my mother is very intuitive as well. She's 90 now and just as sharp as when my grandmother passed away. Um, they allowed us to be a part of that whole thing, that
Mm-hmm.
experience. And I think that's a wonderful thing too. Another subject for another day. But it's just like, as we're talking, these images just keep flooding into my mind. And I just find this fascinating, this whole conversation. Give yourself permission. We encourage you to go to the website. Now, I have two listed here. I have CortInc.com. Is that one we'd want to send? We certainly can send them to Amazon to order a copy of your book. Give yourself permission, as well as Change Starts With You. But is there a more central location where if they want to find out more about you, they want to connect with you and find out
Yes.
more and work with you for that matter?
Thank
Where do you want to
you.
send them?
So the website is the short URL is CORTINC. So Court Inc. And the important thing to just be aware of when you're connecting with me is it's Cortney without a U. So it's Cortney McDermott without a U. And that's why we created a shortened URL to redirect to the Cortney McDermott, the full Cortney McDermott website. So you can find a lot of information on there. There's a free meditation if you wanted to get it that kind of quickly resets your nervous system, can kind of
Hmm.
help boost confidence. And then yeah, Cortney McDermott everywhere books are sold, basically it's available. So and we're coming out with the audiobook for the second book right now, which I was waiting to have be in my own voice. So I'm really excited about that. And everyone can connect with me there. And I want to also shout out your book coming out and all of the excitement around that. And I'd love to hear you say where we can get our hands on the copies. So,
Well, Amazon.com, but you can go through richarddugan.com. There is a link that takes you to Amazon. And my voice will be narrating my book, and I'm very excited about it. I also have to say that I've gotten, and again, I say this humbly, that I've gotten some very, very nice reviews. One is in particular that is not posted yet. I have to figure out how to post my mother's review. She says that she doesn't get along real well with Amazon and posting reviews, which means that she does post reviews, but for whatever reason. But it was very nice. And she said that she says, I learned things about you I did not know that I always wanted to know,
oh, that's
which
great.
which tells me that I need to contact my mother a little bit more. But we've been in communication, and but it is exciting, and it is my first, and it's taken from the impetus of my wife's cancer diagnosis and treatment in 2001 to 2024 September, as a long time, but at the same time, I've also accepted that, it's not in my hands. The universe will tell me when it's time. And the universe did back in either late May or early June in the conversation I had with one of my guests. And it felt right. I mean, righter than it ever had before. And I have made 10 or 15 different, um, you know, time stamps, so to speak, deadlines,
Mhm.
and they come and go.
Mhm.
I've even listened to some of my programs where that are airing, and I make the prediction, and of course it's 2024, and that program originally recorded in 2022, but it's just now airing and so forth. Anyway, so Amazon is where both of our books can be
Yeah.
found, her two and my one, and we certainly hope that you will get a copy. You can go to richarddugan.com as well. I first of all would like to thank you for. Is this the what did you offer? You said not offer. You suggested 30 seconds of yawning.
Yes,
Is
definitely.
it must
That's a
be that
great
time.
reset.
Must be
Yeah.
must be that time of the afternoon where it's time to do that. First of all, I want to thank you so much for giving us so much time here on the program again to talk
Thank
about
you.
this. And there's always so much more to talk about, and we'll have you back again to continue our conversation. And I do look forward. I have Audible, and I get those wonderful little credits, and so as soon as it's available, I'm going to order that and
Right.
listen to that. Certainly, I do have the print copy through the publisher. Um, but this has just been wonderful. So thank you so much for being a part of the work that we're doing here.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you for having me again.
I'm going to ask you those three questions that I asked you the last time, only because sometimes the answers change, and if they don't, that's fine too. But before I do, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m. And we are also on Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m. And we stream live at those times at richarddugan.com. Podcast, SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM. You can also watch these conversations on YouTube. Hope you'll subscribe. And I also hope that you will click notification so that when I post a new conversation, guess what? You'll be notified. And you will be able to, as I've been saying, eavesdrop on a conversation. It's perfectly okay to eavesdrop on these conversations. We hope that you will many times. And let's see here. I've already mentioned about the book. So also, if you'd like to, if you would like to be a part of the work that we're doing here, we could certainly use any financial support that you can provide us. We have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And as I mentioned earlier, please take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to listen to that still small voice. With all of that being said, let's go ahead and jump into those final three questions, and they are in order. Who is Cortney McDermott
Mm.
without a U?
So many active changing potentials all the time.
What gets you up in the morning?
Everything. I get excited about everything. It's just unfolding and the not knowing, which used to feel scary and now just feels exciting and euphoric.
Mm. And what was your best day?
The day my daughter was born.
Mm. Well, Cortney, once again, thank you for joining us. And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. And until our next podcast, videocast, love to long. Jeanette, I am still listening. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.